and to continue to understand this process very well. So what these working papers are helping us to do is to see is to make sense really of the ongoing electoral process, how we can get the best out of this process. So colleagues, I hope that that in itself is a valuable input that we all should be, feeling good to associate with. So hopefully we shall, as we go along, find ways of ensuring that we get the best out of this process. So having said all those many words, it may be time for us to kick off with the first speaker. I see we have two people signed in who will be speaking. I am not yet sure if our colleague is Alice signed in. If you are, then please let us know so that we can have you speak first. But I can see Jackie is here and Micheal Aboneka is here. So just to confirm, is Alice, are you online? Okay, so if we have a jet in, I don't have any confirmation here. If Alice is online, I would like now to quickly ask that we invite the next speaker, who would be Jackie Kibirige, to give us her 15-minute presentation of what she would like.
I'm online. Sorry, I'm online. Unfortunately, I'm on the road. I'll need like 3 minutes to find where to park, then I can present.
Oh, so Jackie, you are online, you are on the road. Should we start with Micheal?
Yes, Micheal can start, or alternatively, you can give me around 3 minutes and then I park and present.
Okay, so let's have Micheal start, and then we allow you to settle down a little bit, and then we shall come back to you in the next 15 minutes. So Micheal, are you able to go on now?
Yes, I am. Good afternoon, colleagues. For some reason, my technique, the tech on my side is playing me, so I'll be using two accounts. So don't mind on which one I'll choose to share my screen. So I'm going to share my screen now. Be able to see my screen there, and because of bandwidth, good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity, as colleagues at CBR and the reviewers. I'm going to switch off my video so that I am able to work within the bandwidth that I have. So let me just do that and go straight into my discussion. So my chapter, I'm looking at the election management and its effect on the credibility of elections in Uganda. And I'll be looking majorly at the paper will focus on the institutional framework and independence of the Electoral Commission, which includes appointment of commissioners, the financial and operational autonomy, the logistics and operational autonomy, and the readiness in terms of operations, voter registration, civic and voter education, use of technology in elections, the issue of observers and media accreditation, the nomination fees, and then the recommendations, and I give some best practices. But just to say that from the beginning that the title should not confuse us, but majorly I'm looking at electoral management. I know that the title talks about Electoral Commission readiness, though that is part of it, but majorly I'm looking at how elections are managed to be able to deliver the free and fair elections. So mostly this paper takes a doctrinal research methodology where I'm analyzing all these legal instruments, the guidelines from EC and elsewhere, the cases from courts, and then the reports. This includes the observer reports and many other reports, the documentaries, the news articles, journals, books, and book chapters. But also it will take some form of short interviews that I've been able to discuss with some of the commissioners and some reports from some of the events that Electoral Commission has attended, which I will put later in the paper. So as a way of introduction, my introduction part talks about how we've had about 6 and 8 elections. I think there's a contestation there, but to me, I see 6 from 86 under the NRM government. I talk about that in detail and also speak about the credibility of the Electoral Commission, that the credibility of an election depends on the EC independence, the resources, the transparency, the legal framework, the capacity to deliver an election, and public trust. And also in the introduction, I talk about the persistent issues that have always come out, which is the logistics delays, the legal disputes, the voter anomalies, and the interference, partially because of the partiality and also the partiality of the Electoral Commission. So my introduction just gives an overview of what this paper looks at, and especially the key issues and what needs to be resolved. And my paper also, in the introduction, gives my opinion on how the conduct of an election in terms of management impedes the credibility of an election. So straight away, I give my opinion from the beginning on the situation. So briefly, under the institutional framework and independence of the Electoral Commission, I talk about the legal framework which establishes the Electoral Commission, and the paper is detailed. It also talks about the Electoral Commission Act and the rest, and the members, how they are appointed by the president, their mandate to organize and supervise the elections and voter registers, the oversight mechanisms which exist, and also the public interest, which remains low. And also the 2020 amendment, which introduced the word independent before the Electoral Commission to make it the Independent Electoral Commission. And one of the things is whether by addition, it means that now the Electoral Commission is independent. So those are some of the things I discussed deeply in the paper. Now, on the appointment of commissioners, the biggest point is that under the constitutional framework, all commissioners are appointed by the president and vetted by parliament. And the biggest point there is that the parliamentary vetting lacks transparency and public input. The Appointments Committee of Parliament is the only committee of parliament that I know of that is closed. No media is allowed, not anyone is allowed. So you never get to know what takes place there. And it is the only committee of parliament whose report is not tabled before the floor of parliament for discussion. So meaning that whatever goes in there, no one gets to know. The speaker who heads the appointments committee will just forward the names to the president and say, we have vetted the rest, please go ahead. So it is closed, there is no public participation. According to Afrobarometer, of August 2025, they talk about only 4 out of 10 Ugandans that trust the Electoral Commission, and only about half of the Ugandans that were participated in the survey believe that the 2021 election was free and fair, and many expressed fears of intimidation. So that still shows you that there's still an issue of the trust of the Electoral Commission, but also if the last election that was supervised by the Electoral Commission, half of the Ugandans believe that it was fair, it means that others still believe, the half believe that it is not. So also on the appointment of the commissioners, I take the comparative analysis of the South African model, where the appointments go through 3 phases. The nominations by a panel, which forwards the names to the National Assembly Committee, and then finally to the president. So this allows public participation, but also scrutiny beyond just the parliament and the president, and also which makes sense. So also part of methodology, I take the comparative analysis right away in my paper at various sections as I go on. The other point is the issue of financial and operational autonomy, and which is key. The Electoral Commission has been talking about having delays in terms of funding. And in 2016, again, I take a comparison there and trends analysis. Now they received about 476 billion, and now they received 839 billion shillings, but they still say the money is not enough. But the most important things about the funding is that the contestation of whether this money is 100% from the budget or not. Again, the Electoral Commission on Monday, in the dialogue I was part of, they claim that all the 100% money that the Electoral Commission gets from the Republic of Uganda taxpayers, and none of it comes from anywhere, from any external force. Say development partners and the rest. But then there's a contestation of, does Uganda fund all its budget 100%? Is it possible to remove the Electoral Commission budget from the entire national budget to say that the entire Electoral Commission budget is locally funded? So there's also that issue. But there is definitely the funding shortfalls, which Electoral Commission has continued to decry of. And in the paper, I talk of incidents where the Electoral Commission has gone before the parliamentary committee and argued for increase, argued for timely disbursement, and that also brings a problem, because as of January 2025, there was a funding gap of 624 billion shillings, which we don't know whether that has been released, and of which 62 billion was towards the new premises in Lobowa, which again they say is 100% funding. The development partners, I think, approached the Electoral Commission to fund the new premises, and the Electoral Commission said no. This is information I got on Monday, so I don't know how true that is. But the point I make there is that the Electoral Commission activities happen every 5 years, and therefore planning for the availability of funds to support this process should be anticipated, because these elections are anticipated. We should not be having the cries of the Electoral Commission here and there over funds, yet we know that elections happen every 5 years. And I propose that we need to have a ring-fenced electoral fund, just like we have a roads fund and other funds, so that we have money enough for the Electoral Commission to do its work. But the other point I make is the issue of strengthening the financial autonomy and the credibility of the EC, having stronger audit and oversight requirements. Recently, we had a number of commissioners leaving because of corruption issues, which I also note. On the point about the issues of logistics, late delivery of materials, the poor training, and one of those is that for example, in Kampala, in the 2021 elections, Kampala received their polling materials at 3 p.m., which disenfranchised the most of the Kampala residents, because they were not able to vote because of that. Also, reports indicate that the training of the polling officials has also been uneven, because in some cases there was confusion over voter identification, handling of biometric devices, or tallying forms. And these were reported in the number of observer reports in the 2016 elections and 2021 as well. There was also the failure of the biometrics machines in some areas. In some areas, for example, some machines failed in some polling stations, having the polling officials resort to manual systems because they didn't know how to use them. So most of these logistics issues need to be handled prior to the elections. As I speak now, the Electoral Commission says they have 52,000 polling stations, but they are going to further break down the polling stations because they said that it will take only 600 voters to vote between 7 and 4 p.m. if they're to use biometric systems, meaning it's going to have a delay. So they are proposing that they further break down the polling stations into maybe another 2. So times 2. So we're most likely to have over 100,000 polling stations. And as I speak now, the Electoral Commission says they have not yet released the final register and the polling with the polling information because they want to revise and create more polling stations because they want to use the biometric machines. Now, we have almost 3 months to the elections. The political parties are not aware of the new polling stations. Even voters, we are not aware whether by tomorrow, if I check on the e-system for my voter information, I'll be able to know where I'm going to vote from. So that's also the other problem, and I think I'm already discussing it on the preparedness. Now, these are the key components on the issues of the voter register. There has been an issue, especially on the cutoff date, and again with the Electoral Commission, they say that for purposes of logistics and handling, they would rather have a cutoff date in February, which is almost like 8 months or 6 months to the elections, because they say that that helps them to have ballots printed and prepared. And about 1 million youth this time around will be cut off. In 2021 elections, over 1 million youth 2 million youth were cut off because they were not able to join the register because they had already made 18 years. They would have already made 18 years by the time of voting, but they were cut off because of the cutoff point, which was 6 months to elections. And one of the things that I recommend is that is it possible to find a way to have this cutoff point reduced to at least 6 months or 5 months, because the EC is using almost a year because I also understand that there is the logistics that is important. Again, on the issue of the biometrics, I've already talked about that. The Electoral Commission is insisting that they need more polling stations because it only takes 600 voters per polling station. Now, if a polling station has originally 2,000 voters registered, meaning that they will not all be able to vote in a day because the biometric system also and verification takes time. The other issue is about the transparency in terms of verification and the display of the register. Up to now, the final register is not known because the Electoral Commission says they cannot give it out. They cannot give it out. They cannot give it out because they are still doing what they call further management of the register and also the polling stations. Secondly, on the issue of public audit of the biometric system, the Electoral Commission is not yet clear on how political parties and the public can join in terms of auditing the biometrics, how they should work, and how the public should know how to use them. That information is not yet out, but presidential candidates are busy campaigning, and we don't know how that's going to turn out. The other crucial point is the issue about civic and voter education. Now, I start from the point that, first of all, political education in Uganda and civics were banned from the curriculum and syllabus. They are no longer taught. So that means that the burden has been shifted to those that are supposed to do that. According to Electoral Commission and the Human Rights Commission and the Equal Opportunities Commission, they claim that they are supposed to be doing the civic education and the voter education. And you can imagine only 300 million shillings has been allocated for voter education from the 2025 up to now. And I don't know, I've not seen, apart from the use of Twitter, the X, and a few messages on radio, I've not seen massive voter education. But the Electoral Commission says, what can we do with 300 million shillings? So we are going to an election, we are going to have more polling stations, we are going to use biometrics, but Ugandans don't know about these processes. Number two, the civil society that has been helping to support the civic education and also the voter education, most of them have not had funding. They have not been received their accreditation because one of the things that the Electoral Commission chose them was to engage into subversive activities, but also using voter education as a vehicle for their critique of government. And I make mention of a number of civil society organizations and coalitions like the New Uganda, SEDU, that were clamped down because they were supporting the work on civic education. So I note that civic education is still low and is still poor because the Electoral Commission says they have no money, but also there's infighting. The Equal Opportunity Commission says we're the ones to do it. The Uganda Human Rights Commission says they're the ones to do it. So up now, it's not clear who should take lead, and yet it's supposed to happen. On the use of technology, we have no law on elections. I make that emphatically because since 2021 and 2026, the Electoral Commission has been asked to ensure that the issues of use of technology in an election are transparent. And in there, I take the comparative of Kenya, of how the use of the technology is embedded in the law and how transparent it is. Of course, it has its own challenges, but it is something that everyone is able to follow. The Electoral Commission insists that this time around, they said they were able to detect the fraud of the nomination signatures using technology, but they didn't disclose which technology. And they also insist that they are going to use biometrics and technology in the coming election for registration, for verification, and tallying of results. But I don't know how many have participated, especially political parties and the players have participated in the simulations and in terms of how this technology is going to play around. So there's a lack of legal framework, but also in terms of participation. There's the biggest issue of the internet shutdown. We already seen a minister saying that internet is going to be shut down. And also that is definitely something that may happen. So if we have no internet, people are supposed to send these results using internet, I don't know how that's going to be. So we are still in the guess of how technology is going to play around. But I also note in my paper that in the 2016 Amama Mbabazi petition number 1, the Supreme Court made a very clear recommendation on technology. I won't read it, but it talks about we need to have a law and we need to make sure that the citizens are sensitized on this. And this hasn't been done. And up to now, we haven't had any law on that. So in terms of finally on the technology, is that I implore the Electoral Commission to study South Africa, to study Kenya on how they have been able to successfully use those technologies. And you must know that in those countries, none of their internet was switched off. In fact, in South Africa, the telecoms private sector provided more faster internet called Wi-Fi 6 to be able for citizens and the players to be able to follow the elections and the displays. The issues of observers and accreditation, it has been an issue. We had, I noted in my paper about the issues of a number of civil society organizations like NUU, like SEDU and SION were denied registration. Actually, SEDU was suspended and NUU issues were also suspended. And I note that the issue of election observation is a citizen's right, whether they are as individuals or collective. And therefore, the EC has no mandate to stop anyone from observing elections. I also note about the number, the 21 or 28 data analysts that were arrested at Hotel Africana that were supporting civil society. And I note the trend of how election observation is now being crippled and that people are not able to observe their own elections. Secondly, I note from the reports from the AU and other observers who critically call on the Electoral Commission to ensure as wide as possible the observers. I also note out how the US did not observe our elections last year and how the EU also made a proviso on our elections last year. So we don't know who is going to observe our elections this year, but the most important point there is that We should allow more domestic observers. We should allow citizens, because in 2021 and 2016, there was a restriction on access to polling and tallying centers. So everyone was working in oblivion, everyone was working in the dark, and they were not aware of what was happening. And same for the media accreditation. As I wind up, the issue of nomination fees, and this is something that up to now, I am asking myself whether it should be a function of Electoral Commission or Parliament. Because I know that the incumbents want to use it to lock out the new entrant, but is it free? Is it fair? Is it equitable? Because I note down how this discriminates the youth, especially the women, persons with disabilities, and I give a comparative of Kenya and Ghana, where, for example, in Ghana, there's specific fees, reduced fees for women, for youth, and for persons with disabilities. They don't pay the same amount of money. And to me, the 20 million shillings, for example, for the presidential elections is quite high for any Ugandan to be able to especially young people, to be able to contest in the elections. And so our flat system limits anyone to participate in the election. So I recommend there that the Ghana model and the Kenyan model can be looked at, but also in terms of how we need to participate. Who sets these nomination fees? Is it just for purposes of collecting revenue? But we need also to participate in that debate. So in summary, I make recommendations to the effect that we need to implement the Supreme Court recommendations in 2016 elections, especially on technology. And the most important is that the Supreme Court made recommendation that any reforms should come, any reforms or any changes in management of an election should come within 2 years before an election. But here we are, 4 districts were created out of Tororo, and many other things are being formed out there. We have the issues of polling stations coming in, and we're not aware how far that is going to be. Number 2, we need to strengthen the independence of and transparent appointments of the Electoral Commission, and I make observation of how we need to take into account public participation. I highly recommend that we need to open up the Appointments Committee of Parliament, because where I stand from, whatever they have been doing to me is unconstitutional, because the law says that the commissioners will be approved by Parliament. My understanding is that a Committee of Parliament is not equivalent to Parliament. And some of us are having contestation on probably going to a constitutional court to review that again. I know there's been a ruling on that, but we want to understand that especially issues to do with a appointment of commissioners, the ministers, they should be approved by Parliament. And Parliament means the committee of the whole House of Parliament and not a closed one. Review nomination fees, like I've discussed, to allow inclusivity. We need to legislate secure and accountable use of technology. We need a law of technology, and all this should happen 2 years before election. We need to expand civic and voter education nationwide, and also institutionalize stakeholder engagement and oversight to ensure that EC does not choose on who to engage with. These dialogues that that keep cropping up, but it should be institutionalized to ensure that there's oversight. So I conclude by saying that if the credibility of an election largely lies on the management and the preparedness of the electoral management body in terms of how they will be able to deliver the election. And the preparedness also has a bearing on the trust, how citizens trust it in order to deliver the election. I thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. I think that has been very well presented. We get the gist of where the flow of your paper, and we'll certainly be happy to make comments on some of the analytical frames and paths that you choose to take. But having said that, we would like to now move on to the next presenter. So our next presenter, I hope you have now packed and you have the ability to make a presentation. So would like now to invite our next presenter. I think that is Jackie. Is it you? Is Alice on the line before we continue? Alice, are you on the line? Are you on the call?
I think I can present.
Just hold on. Let me first find out if Alice is on the call. Are you there, Alice?
Yes, I'm there. I'm already sharing. Can I kindly request that I present
No,
first?
I request
Okay.
that I present in my slot because I'm still on the road.
Okay, so
My God, 4
Alice,
o'clock
are
is too
you
late
okay?
for me.
Pardon?
Hello?
Are you okay to have Jackie present and you present, or are you also constrained?
Remember, I'd already requested that I present first given my other assignments. But because I delayed, again, pushing me to 4 is too much for me. So that will be taking me to 5 o'clock more or less.
Oh, so you are not ready to cede space for Jackie who is on the road because I
Okay,
think
it is
being on the
fine.
road.
It is fine. It is fine.
No, let
But
her
if I
present.
fail
Let
to
me continue driving. Let her
Okay, so
present. Let me continue. Yes.
what we'll do, Jackie?
okay, let
Since
Jackie
you're on the
present.
road,
Let Jackie present anyway.
we
No, since you've started sharing
uh,
already, you can start.
colleagues, allow me to make a ruling. It will be easier. So, Jackie, since you are on the road, I think it's better for you to present, and then we will have Alice presenting. As you know, now that we know that both of you are constrained,
I'm in a
we
meeting.
can ask you to, do it in a little bit shorter, but just make sure that you are comprehensive enough. So over to you, Jackie, for about 10 minutes. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. This is Jackie. I'm presenting about regional and global dynamics in Uganda's 2025-2026 elections. And the best argument for this paper is that elections, much as they are domestic political processes, they attract a lot of global, regional, and global attention and interest. Why? Because we see that we are traditional media, currently social media and civil society interest groups, elite cabals and criminal organizations and networks pay attention to elections, including terrorist groups as well, because the outcome, the election process itself, they take interest in the election process itself, and also the outcome of the elections because of their initial interest that they have. Because the outcome of elections would influence, for instance, the policies that can affect, for example, foreign investments, but also the flow of foreign funding. I could give an example of the 2021 elections. Prior to the elections, or as we were moving towards the election season, we saw that there was a lot of talk about the LGBT rights and which parties that or the views that the different political parties had about this movement. So for this paper, I'm just giving snapshots because I don't have access to my laptop. And for this paper, we are going to use it's a qualitative. We're going to for the case of methodology, we rely on qualitative interviews and a qualitative review of documents. For the qualitative interviews, we shall be interviewing the different embassies, the different embassies, those that are the regional embassies representing the East African community, but also representatives of the African Union, to see the interests that these different regional organizations have and how these interests are negotiated. But also we interview Europe, diplomatic missions, the European ones and the North America, but also the Ugandan Ministries of Foreign Affairs, East African Community, the Justice and Constitutional Affairs, and the Electoral Commission. Hopefully, the findings will tell us the dynamics in these elections, that which, while are domestic, the regional and global implications, and also the regional and foreign states and foreign organizations have which incentives they have in our elections, and how these can upset the existing relations or let alone destabilize the country, because there already existing worries that there are lots of foreign influences or foreign funding that could be funding some form of dissent in the current elections. We look in choosing out the regional dynamics, we look at it from a historical perspective. Historical perspective, also looking at the regional political and security and economic dynamics, the global dynamics, and how these converge. We also look at the regional and global interests in national elections, who are interested in these elections, which regional actors, which global actors, why are they interested, how are they interested, and how are these being expressed. Then for the regional and global convergence, we look at the regional versus the global. We look at convergence versus divergence of interests. And then how are all these interests negotiated? Are they negotiated for the sake of stability or to destabilize? Then we also look at the peaceful continuity of governance in the country, the normative promises of elections, and how all these are perceived at the regional and global level. We also see how the African interests the African interests, or the interests of the African regional actors, for instance, the East African Community and the African Union, how their interests converge or diverge with other foreign interests, including the European and North American interests, and how all these converge on Uganda's democratic trajectory. I think that is what I can say for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jackie, for that quick snapshot of what your paper will be looking at. Of course, as you said, if you had your computer, then maybe it will be much more comprehensive, but we'll see what colleagues think in terms of comments and reactions. So I think without further ado, since Alice was also constrained for time, Alice, you're welcome to make your presentation.
Thank you so much, colleagues, and apologies for the dynamics. I'm trying to share my screen.
Yes, we can see a screen, but it's the computer screen. Okay, now we can see the presentation.
Okay, I hope it is clear. Oh, something has moved.
Yes, it is. I think if you put it in slideshow, it will even be better.
Yeah, let me first edit here, then something had moved. All right, I think you can all see my screen. Is it visible?
Yes,
Hello?
it is visible. Please go ahead. It is visible.
All right, thank you so much for this opportunity. Like I said, apologies for the dynamics. I was having another meeting that came into this one, but I'm happy that you're there to listen to me. So I'm looking at analyzing the populism in Uganda's National Youth Service agenda from the lens of critical diversity literacy. And this is in the theme of youth dynamics and something is blocking, youth dynamics and the electoral process. The order of presentation is as you see it. I'm going to give a brief introduction, aim and scope of the study, research questions, theoretical conceptualization, the policy frameworks, feasibility and theoretical grounding, methodology, and way forward. Getting to the background, we all understand that the cornerstone for democratic governance is inclusive participation in political processes, because this determines the dynamics of the structure and distribution of political power, as well as the nature of political and economic institutions that shape the political trajectory of society. And therefore, it becomes important that countries create space for youth participation in a country's governance. And this can be through creating space for them to participate in elections by voting. It can be by creating space for them to vie for leadership positions in a country, attending public meetings, attending political campaigns, drafting policies, or even effectively mobilizing the youth to participate in the affairs of the economy for nurturing and mentorship into active citizenship. Getting to the context of Uganda, Uganda is considered among the pioneer countries sub-Saharan Africa to include youths in decision-making structures. And there is existence of the institutional and organizational structures that foster youth participation. And we see that Uganda has had a network of political youth organizations dating to the 1960s. And currently, one of the strategies for mobilizing the youth has been a compulsory national youth service. Of course, you may ask whether it is really compulsory at the moment, but it is a suggestion that all the youth should go through compulsory youth service. And it is envisioned that amongst the strategies for this is to enlist youth discourses on national issues that foster awareness and nurture a patriotic citizenry, but also build a civically competent citizenry in terms of civic knowledge, skills, dispositions for deepening democracy. So the problem comes that much as we have the institutional framework and structures for incorporating youth or for engaging youth in the democratic governance of the country, we are aware that the youth are categorized as a special interest group. Even when it comes to the ministry under the youth operate and whatever strategies for mobilizing them, it is like their special interest group. And therefore, this strategy is criticized as institutionalizing governance and for retaining and maintaining control by the autocratic ruling government. Because inclusion of the youth in political decision-making from the perspective of vulnerability limits their access to several rights that would be available in the democratic governance or in a democratic government. Because mobilization for civic engagement should allow freedom of participation. We are all aware that the youth have radical views that must be tolerated, that must be recognized, other than mobilizing them through an approach that is seemingly populist, that is intended to show support and patronage by the NRM autocratic regime. So as socializing agents for partnerships and organizational learning processes, my feeling is that radical views and aggressive methods of the youth are recognized and appreciated by the current government. And yet we all know that this is not endorsed because of the so many restrictions that have been put, for instance, on mobilization, on public gatherings, but also even limitations when youths try to mobilize via social media. All those mobilization strategies for the youth to engage are in most cases curtailed. So rather than creating a patriotic citizenry, the youth service program builds on a strategy of the NRM system established during the guerrilla war that in most cases favors cooperation rather than empowerment. By this, I mean that it is the youth who cooperate that are absorbed, and those who seem to have different ideas, divergent views, in most cases, their ideas are not fully endorsed and they are not fully absorbed within a democratic governance structure as required. So the aim and scope of this study, I would wish to interrogate whether the values exposed by the National Youth Service are actually embraced at a broader national perspective or are more narrowly focused to the interests of a specific political organ. If I get back to the background, I've mentioned that there are structures that are put in place to mobilize and engage with the youth in democratic governance. And even when we get to the National Youth Service, there are some values that they're expected to expose. But then when it comes to reality, is it the same values or it is something that is narrowly focused? So that is my major thesis for argument. And the study aims to answer the following research question: nature of Uganda's National Youth Service Program. And then the second is what knowledge and practices are imparted in the youth at the training in order to influence mindset change towards social transformation into patriotic citizens. Then the other one is which approaches to National Youth Service could be applied to transform the youth into visionary citizens with knowledge, skills, and civic dispositions that can lead to meaningful participation in Uganda's development agenda. The theoretical conceptualization, I look at the ideologies, the logic, the discourses, and strategic approaches that inform National Youth Service by looking at what the countries have done in as far as National Youth Service is concerned. And we are all aware that National Youth Service is not only a thing that is done in Uganda, but we have countries that really emphasize National Youth Service. For instance, you get to countries out there like Switzerland, even in Nigeria, in Africa, they emphasize National Youth Service because, it is a driver for nurturing a culture of unity, tolerance, ethics, civic responsibility, as well as patriotism among the youths. And well-inculcated youth service programs facilitate understanding among the population of their roles and responsibilities towards the self, society, and development. So I'm going to look at this, what is, and against what should be. So this theoretical perspective is going to guide my analysis of the nature of the National Youth Service in Uganda, what message is passed on, whether this message is really nurturing our youth into patriotic citizens or it is bent towards building a loyal group of youths to a certain political group. So I also look at the policy frameworks for youth mobilization in my theories. And I start with the National Youth Development Framework that dates back to the colonial times. Of course, this framework was there, but mainly based on ethnic, religious, and other organizations that was scattered. It was not, it was in silos. But then the national policy for the youth was developed in the 1960s, where it was placed under the Ministry of Culture and Community Development. And this led to formation of 3 organs. I put 3 or 4 because here they look like 4, but then they say they are the 3 organs. And that is the National Union of Youth Organization, the Uganda Youth Development Organization, and the National Union of Students of Uganda to cater for those school-going youth. But we had the Youth Farmers Union that catered for the youth that were engaged in agriculture at the time. So we are all aware that these structures have changed over time. However, youth participation is still recognized by the 1993 National Youth Council Statute, as well as the 2001/2016 National Youth Policy. But also, if we base this within the global trends in as far as democratic governance and participation is concerned, youth participation can be rooted in Chapter 6 of the Global Human Development Agenda that calls for youth inclusion under the Sustainable Development Goals, especially the Agenda for 2030, that recognizes the youth as agents of change and calls for their meaningful participation in all development efforts. So if I look at the policy frameworks, especially rooting it from the National Youth Policy and the Global Agenda under the Sustainable Development Goals, and we're looking at youth inclusion as agents of change, are Ugandan youth in totality included as agents of change in the democratic process, or there are still challenges? So these policy frameworks are going to guide my analysis on the issues that impact full participation of the youth. We all know that we have these policy frameworks, but there are also implementation gaps. And from the literature so far reviewed, I've established factors such as exclusion of youth, specifically those in rural areas, the illiterate and semi-illiterate, those with divergent views, as mentioned earlier, are excluded either directly or indirectly from leadership positions. Then there are also restrictions on youth mobilization. There's also a lack of a clear demarcation between national and the dominant NRM party mobilization. The findings from literature also show manipulative and exploitative approaches to mobilizing youth due to factors such as high unemployment, poverty, redundancy, inadequate guidance and counseling, lack of genuine role models. There's also limited access to relevant information. There's inadequate information for leadership and meaningful participation. Of course, someone commented about Electoral Commission. The fees that are required to be paid, for instance, is very high for someone to register a party, later on register to be nominated to participate in the politics. Sometimes the youths who may be willing to participate are knocked out. So here I argue that despite government creating avenues for youth engagement, my paper indicates some of these avenues, there is still limited participation of the youth because of the factors that hinder their full participation. Then I get to the topic of populism. because it is the niche of my discussion. Populism is about manipulating the masses by portraying a certain regime as a savior of the people. And when we get back to Uganda's politics, we see that the message that has been popularized by the ruling government is emphasis on the Bush War, the rhetoric of the NRM as being the liberator from the past terrorist regimes, which ideology sometimes tends to propagate divides between the liberators and the traitors. It is like, yeah, we have those that liberated, we had those that were traitors. And remember all this, both the liberators and the traitors have supporters. So this perpetuates divides and segregation and sometimes chaos amongst the people in society and hinder meaningful participation. And here, with such messages of liberators, it positions the NRM leadership as the true representatives of the common people because they are the saviors. Then also we see the NRM government positioning itself as the major source of economic success in Uganda. Then we have promises of economic empowerment through government programs. And all this resonate with the global populist tendencies. At the moment, of course, the major campaign that I see in the social media by the NRM government is getting people out of poverty through governments like the parish development model, the EMYOGA program, and giving out money to the youth organizations with the view of getting them out of poverty and promising more funding to such programs that are going to get people out of poverty and getting Uganda into a middle income country or even a rich country by 2040. So we appreciate the messages, but they are populist in nature. And therefore, there's a likelihood of turning the National Youth Service into an avenue for manipulating of these largely hopeless youths, like I mentioned, who are unemployed, who are redundant, who are hopeless, and so on. Moreover, the National Youth Service could be a tool for mobilizing the youth against whatever threat is there to the NRM government, because we are all aware that majority of the Ugandans right now are the youths. About 75% are the youthful population. And if these people are not well mobilized, they can be a threat to any government, much as they can also be an advantage. So the youth can be an advantage, but they can also be a threat. So National Youth Service may be a tool for mobilizing the youth, especially if they are perceived to be a threat to the ruling government. So rallying youth support is also interesting due to the recent trends and revolutionary uprisings that have been led by the youths. We've seen several changes in governments in African countries like Tunisia, Egypt, and even the recent Gen Z movement in Kenya, where the youth are at the fore of mobilizing against the government policies that they feel are not favorable. So are we mobilizing the youth for empowerment, or we are mobilizing them because we see them as a possible threat if they are not well mobilized? So those are some of the arguments I'll have in my paper. Then getting to the theory, because I'm looking at all this from the lens of critical diversity literacy. CDL framework aims at society where transformation, integration, and equality play a significant role in disrupting the hierarchical social imageries that characterize our society. So when we're looking at it from this framework, the assumption is whatever is done in every government. We should be able to work towards transforming and integrating and ensuring that there's equality. If we are talking about youth empowerment, participation, and inclusion in the democratic governance processes of a country, are we able to disrupt the hierarchical social imageries, those populist ideologies, so that we come up with something that can be bought in, that can be helpful to all the youth, and ensure that every person is included with all the intersections that we have amongst the youthful population. So the CDL framework revisits the theoretical underpinnings of inclusivity and pro-people competitive political processes that would be more empowering for the youths. So I hope to use this framework in analyzing my findings when I'm finally there. The methodology, it is going to be majorly a qualitative study that has started with a systematic review of both local and international literature to understand the dynamics, underlying dynamics in patriotic campaigns and national youth services. And this one is going to help to add to knowledge and scholarship in the discipline of populism, which is a growing trend for mobilizing patronage and control and sustenance of power by autocratic leaders. Then the literature analysis will be supplemented with narratives as a qualitative study. I'll have narratives that I'll obtain through semi-structured interviews, focus group discussions, especially with the youths that have recently graduated from the National Youth Service programs. But I will also have interviews, either physical interviews or phone interviews, whatever will allow, with purposively selected number of key persons, especially those that train the youths at the youth camps, or the persons that are responsible for rolling out patriotic clubs in Uganda schools. Then I'll also have interviews with political analysts to ascertain what is going on. The way forward, I would say this is work in progress. I've completed the first phase of data collection, which is not conclusive either, because I need to review more as I write other sections. I think even when I do analysis, I'll do more reading, but at least I've done the preliminaries of trying to do a review of, in order to obtain background information. And what I hope to get into next is the empirical phase of data collection, and that will help me to complete my entire paper in due course. Thank you for listening to me. That is what I'd prepared as of today. Thank you, and back to you, Chair.
Well, thank you very much to all of you, the three presenters, to Michael, to Jackie, and to you, Alice. Thank you for enriching the discussion around elections from different perspectives. Let me open up the floor. We will use the next 21 minutes to listen to any comments on the three papers. As usual, if you have a comment, please indicate who it's being directed to. We would like to have as many as possible, meaning would limit the amount of time everybody can speak so that we can all chip in. So raise your hand, and then we'll be able to see you and give you the microphone. You can put down your screen, Alice. Okay. So who takes the first slot?
Hello, Chairperson. Move.
Yes, please go ahead.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you very much. These are interesting narratives. And I think everybody, they have deep knowledge in their field. I would like to start with the youth. Is it possible to have the voice of the youth themselves? Because I think all these times we have been talking about populist politics and how it constructs the youth. Is it possible to get the voice of the youth themselves in terms of how they are engaging in this populist kind of politics? Because at some point it sounds so obvious that yes, they are manipulated, blah, blah, and so on. That was one quick response that I had. And then on election management, I'm wondering, Michael, to whom are these recommendations addressed? They sound like they are taking the situation to be normal, and therefore you can make recommendations. I see this as a very, I don't even think that one should call it an elections per se. So in a sense, I feel like the analysis is giving us, is doing us a disservice by conditioning us to almost think that it's a normal election and there are gaps. I think that there is a fundamental issue that needs to be addressed. These are not gaps. The recommendations, this is October.
Your line is breaking.
The elections, the polling day maybe January something. So what? Oh, I don't want to go on and on. Thank you very much, members.
Thank you very much for those insights. Any other comments, colleagues?
Maybe, Chair, I didn't get the last bit of Dr. Hikile's submission. I think on the network issue. If she could kindly
Yes, because
repeat
of
that for me.
network issues, we'll see if we can ask her to speak again, but let's first go around and see who else wants to say something. Any other comments? If there are no comments on my side, I think I also had a couple of points to make. I think, again, on the issue around election management, my proposal would be that the paper may not need to become an instrumentalist paper in the sense that it is out there to give recommendations and whatever, but probably you need to reflect a bit more and help us to really understand this whole notion of managing elections through electoral management bodies. Because I think that practice in its own right, the practice of running elections in a manner that is very much rooted in a framing which is conformist, very forceful, and then creating bodies like the Electoral Commission that in many ways sometimes comes off as a vehicle for whitewashing rather than a vehicle for actually going into creating a credible and independent election. So to try and do a bit of that would be helpful. And probably the contradiction that you point out is probably the best strength of the paper, meaning that as you do your own analysis, I think it would be good for the reader to get a sense of the insights that emerge from the contradictions of how the Electoral Commission finds itself in a sort of catch-22 situation where it seems to present itself as actually a body that is managing, and it's very much not able to shoulder all the management that it needs, that there are hundreds of other forces that come in to interfere. That's one. But then on the Jackie's paper, I still feel maybe we shall need a bit more information around what her core argument is. In a sense, listening to her, maybe because she was in a rush, I wasn't sure what was the core argument around foreign forces and our elections. Yeah, because interviewing a few people, yeah, is important, but I think one can nuance the actual issue around elections and foreign forces in a much more deeper manner. So again, for me, I would like to see a bit more articulation of what is the core argument that that paper is making. And on the youth, I think the question that I don't see, he may have left, Andrew Karamaji asked before around on another paper on young people. Other than the point that has been made by Professor Ichire that, look, can you talk to the youth themselves and see what they say? But I think for the youth, we also have to understand that, in a sense, this is never a definite category. It's a moving target. Young people are growing out of youthfulness, growing into youthfulness. How they engage with the process is very much part. So it's something to really think through and see, what does that mean? The fact that youth is not a category that is static, but very much a dynamic category, and what is the meaning of that dynamism in terms of looking at their own involvement. Let me stop talking here and move on. Yes, Moses, your hand is up. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to all the presenters for very interesting papers, prospective papers, all of them on very important subjects and themes. I'll begin with Micheal, and in a sense re-echo some of the observations already made by Josephine and Richard. Yeah, we know the problems with the Electoral Commission as an election management body. I think, Micheal, what you need to do is, and this is not just a cynical comment, you need to recognize, and I'm sure you know this, that the issue here is not that the Electoral Commission is technically incompetent or unable to run an election in an efficient manner. The issue is that there is a fundamentally political matter at hand. So I guess what I'm saying is that, we shouldn't look at an election management body as a technocratic matter. We have to look at it as fundamentally political. And so you need to certainly foreground the fact that those in power, the elites, the ruling group, they are really not interested in an election management body that is independent and competent. So the EC in Uganda will function as well as those with power can allow it to function. So I think that's the starting point empirically from where to proceed. The appreciation that this is a political matter that cannot be fixed technocratically, whether through legal reforms or through some bureaucratic measures at the Electoral Commission itself. That's really not where the solution lies. So if we take that to be what it is and take it seriously, then I guess from a scholarly point of view as a researcher, you really need to take a careful look at the electioneering process itself, particularly what will happen on polling day. How do citizens respond to this kind of situation, especially those citizens who are clamoring for change? How do people deal with an electoral commission that is incompetent and inefficient as a direct political matter, at the behest of those in power? We know, of course, that, there are certain areas, certain constituencies where election outcomes go the way they do, despite the Electoral Commission. So, you get a result that otherwise wouldn't be allowed by the Electoral Commission, but that result is realized anyway. So, I mean, how does that happen? And I think for 2026, the thing that you might be interested in is really paying attention to what is going to happen as people contest and deal with the Electoral Commission on its own turf with its own problems and weaknesses. So I hope that makes sense. And then the paper by Jackie Kibirige, I'll read it also, I think, echo Richard's point. I think, Jackie, you need to be clear about really what you want to study on this subject, because it's a broad enough area with too many moving parts. Foreign interests are not homogeneous, and they are not, they don't converge on one plane or one plate. So which category of foreign interests are you interested in, and from what angle, from what perspective? So in other words, what's really the research question here? What, I think you need to state that up front. So you have a clear channel of investigation that you're pursuing. Otherwise, there's always a danger of getting lost in trying to take on so much, and you end up not doing justice to what you actually want to study. And then lastly, Alice, we know that the youth youth subject is very central to everything that we think about today, politically, economically, and socially. When I first saw the title of your paper with populism in it, I was actually quite, intrigued. I thought that, you want to interrogate populism as a method of public engagement by the masses, in this case, by the youth. But listening to you talk looks like you're looking at the National Youth Service as a populist response to the youth. So as populist policy by those in power. I don't know whether that would be the right framing. I think that, the NRM and Mr. Museveni always, use these sorts of policy interventions in a very deliberate way. And I don't know whether the populist angle would be the best way to frame this. Maybe it is. But in any event, I think that the project your paper would do would help us make good sense of the issues if we can, again, look carefully at what is going to happen in the electioneering processes, and how young people engage with these policies in the political arena. What do they make of National Youth Service as it relates to the electoral processes? I wonder whether, I don't know what the connection is actually. When I was listening to you talk, I didn't quite understand the the analytical and empirical connection you're making between the National Youth Service and the electoral processes. But I guess that's something you can clarify. So in other words, I'm saying I think the paper will be, I think, a rich empirical analysis if it can take on direct the political, the electoral processes as they happen, and the ways in which young people are responding. What are their what are their strategies of responding to policies like these that do not serve them? Are they in other words, where is the agency of young people here? Are they just willful and passive victims of populist interventions? Yep. Okay, I'll stop there. Thanks, Richard.
Hey, all right. Thank you very much, Moses, for those insightful comments. Josephine, your hand is up again.
Yes, I'm in a safe place now.
Okay.
God would never forgive me if I didn't comment on women.
Yes, you are right. Even us would never forgive you.
Is that the God of women or the God of men?
That's very wonderful. I think that this narrative about special interest groups needs to be interrogated. It is tired. It is tired in the sense that it's used in a way that it sounds obvious, and yet it's not innocent. The issue about having special nomination fees for women, I think that is really outright violence. For women who have money, they can actually spend it. I think it's the nature of politics. And I think that's where we should really anchor our arguments. It's not about giving special rates for women so that they are nominated. It's about interrogating the nature of politics. And I think by even creating special things for women, it is further marginalization. What should change is the content of the rules rather than creating us. Because once you do that, there will still be second-class citizens in this contest. And even it makes it worse because then you have created a ghetto that puts them further in that secondary status situation. So that was my comment, which God said, if you don't do it, you're finished.
Just to clarify, Joseph.
Yes?
Who does the comment go to?
Oh, Michael.
Oh, it's Michael.
Yes.
Okay. Michael, yes. Yeah, we talk about gender mainstreaming, and to put a little poison in a stream. So we have to be clear about many things. Thank you very much. Any other comments, colleagues? We want to hand over to the presenters for their response. Alice, you want to respond to your comments first? Okay, please go ahead, and then we shall go round and end with Michael. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I just respond to observations by from the audience. First, to appreciate the colleagues for listening and offering that very constructive feedback on my paper. To start with Josephine, she talks about including the voices of the youth, and indeed that is what I intend to do, because this is a qualitative study, and if you notice, the narratives, the same structured interviews and focus group discussions will be with the youth, because they are key to this whole paper. Their perspectives are very, very important to writing this paper. Then getting to Professor Shed, those very, very constructive insights. I've noted them down, and I'm going to get back to looking at all this vis-a-vis what I've provided. And the beauty of it is that it is work in progress, and a major bit of the paper is what is going to come in the next phase, where I can restructure the paper. I revise it a little bit and see, instead of looking at what has been there to what, I mean, in the past, what is ongoing and what is observed during the election process. So they are very constructive insights, and I hope I'll get in touch with you outside this platform to even seek more guidance on how to rephrase my write-up and make it even better. So it has been nice hearing from you. Thank you so much. And back to you, Chair.
Right, thank you, Alice. We intend to have another go when you have revised and you have a first draft, where we shall have physical seminars at the Center for Basic Research. So yes, there will be an opportunity to interact with those who are able to be there physically. Jacqueline,
Hello.
over to you.
Hello, Chair. Before Jacqueline comes in,
Yes, please.
this is Daniel Ruhweza.
Okay, please go ahead.
Yes, I've been thinking about Michael's paper because it is very central even in this current times. It would be interesting for Michael to kind of dig deeper on this word called readiness. Readiness. In the context in which he looks at that word readiness, it could be two-pronged. There could be readiness with regard to the hardware, that is, we have the paperwork in order, you know, or not, or we have the date set. And then there is the software, which is supposed to tally with maybe the body politic of the country, with regard to delivering a credible result, you know, because you might have all the other things in place, but the general acceptability, you know, it's that legality versus legitimacy debate that I'm thinking about. It would be interesting for him to explore that in the very beginning, so that as he digs deeper, says tick box democracy, whereby yes, the scripts were the ballots were available or not, but as to whether there is that legitimate expectation that actually a difference may or may not happen, whether or not the people have a trust in the process anyway. I think that debate would be very interesting to explore in his paper in that regard. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniel, Doctor. I think that's a very interesting formulation. So again, Michael, you have some even deeper insight there that you can help us to understand. So let's go on, Jackie. Response, please.
Thank you very much. The concerns about my paper was my focus and what exactly I'm looking for. But my key question for this paper is I want to really interrogate the regional global interests that are animating the 2025-2026 elections. That is what I want to really focus on. However, I also acknowledge that looking at the regional and the global could be too wide. So I may have to refocus my paper. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, there are many, as I think what colleagues were saying is that, when you look at this whole notion of regional, there could be interesting insights. Yeah, very many of them. One could be within the East African region, and to just see what kind of interests are there. You could also look at it from the African Union region, and some of the ways in which they are engaging with different elections on the continent. It could be because, and again, you could do a global regional perspective and look at who is interested. Because one of the things I think which is clear is that, for example, this year, this is when we are probably, it's one of the years where we have had no indication of any foreign observers coming in, and one would be interested to know what kind of logic they are using to justify their absence. And yet in other countries, I mean, foreign observers even observed the last full year and all that. So there are many ways you could look at this whole regional interest perspective, which I think would be helpful. So yeah, I think that's it from you. I think, Michael, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I want to thank the viewers who have given me quite interesting perspectives and discussion. I just want to say that I share your sentiments. While I was approaching this, I had all these debates, and thank you for settling it. And I think that most of them have been comments to that regard, and definitely I will look at the paper again in that respect. So thank you. I don't have really much to raise, but to thank them for the comments that I will now look at it more that way. Thank you.
Yes, Michael, you have finished?
Yes, Chair, I have finished. I was just saying that I take note of the comment, and
Okay.
that this will help me to shape the paper. Just I had
Okay,
similar debates prior to writing it, but
okay,
I'm happy that we are on
great.
the same page. Yeah.
Certainly, for me, I love the idea of you sort of engaging with the question of readiness. It feels very sort of fresh as a way to sort of look at this whole question of electoral management. And also some of the issues that have been raised by Professor Ichire around, the whole question of interest groups and all that, and affirmative action. But having said that, colleagues, I think, want to thank all of you for making time for this. As usual, we will share with you the recording from this, especially for the authors, so that you have a good sense of what has come out. Of course, we do a summary, written summary, but that is really for record purposes. But the recording, I think, would be for those who want to listen and understand. I mean, you could listen to that recording and get even more out of that. I see, Daniel, is your hand up, or is?
Yeah, Richard, just another session like this for some of us.
Pardon? Yeah, I didn't hear the first part.
I'm wondering whether there will be an extra session for some of us who haven't had a chance to present.
Yes, there will be. We are going through all the papers. So yeah, there will be a session like this. The next one is next Thursday. Next Thursday is Independence Day, but I hope some of you can find time to celebrate on a webinar. So we will go ahead with it so we don't lose time.
All right.
I think we look forward. giving you these recordings so that you can use them to strengthen this paper. We have a two-pronged process. We want these papers to first come out as working papers, and then there will be book chapters as we process even now. But having said all that, we want to thank all of you who have made time for this webinar, and look forward to even having you. So please come and listen even to those papers that are not your own papers, because it actually is a very enriching exercise just to see how people are engaging with this whole question of elections from different dimensions. With that, we would like to end here, and thank you very much for making time today. Thank you.